I will let you know that I falsely in my mind thought that this was next Tuesday because of the March break. I think that was just some fantasy thinking. So I figured out this afternoon that we are holding this meeting. So here I am to chair, very prepared. And thank goodness. The only people we've heard from in terms of regrets are Jennifer is unable to attend. So she is sending her regrets. So if that is it, then we would move on to the acknowledgement of traditional territory. Just a video, right?
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe Hongwe.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the lands, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
We are back. We are now moving on to the approval of agenda. So if you all had a chance to review that, may I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee approves the agenda for March 18th, 2025. Councilor Elvis and Councilor Platt. And you don't need to go. Okay, so that has been carried.
Yeah.
And I'm going to turn up my
trustees, not Jonathan's.
Sorry, I did not turn my and is there any discussion? Was there any discussion required of the agenda? Right.
On item 13.1, can we make the motion submitted by Barb Sear and Jennifer Knight?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to just, we can add that. Are there any other points of discussion or comments? And we now are carrying the agenda. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest for the meeting tonight? I see none, so we'll move forward. And we're on to approval of the minutes, and that would be for the meeting of February 18, 2025, which I was regretfully absent for. So if everybody has had a moment to go through the minutes of the meeting, I'll ask for a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee approves the minutes of February 18th, 2025. That's Councilor Clark and Elvis again. Wow. Are there any?
Accept the promotion.
Oh, sorry, trustee. You know what? I was on this week, and I'm stuck on that. So trustee Clark and trustee Elvis, is there any discussion on the minutes from February 18th? Okay, seeing none. All in favor? Okay, so that is carried. The minutes of February 18th, 2025 have been adopted. And in terms of delegations of public questions, so far none. So we're moving on to reports from staff. And first of all, the superintendent's report, the written oral one.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening and share PDSB updates. Tonight, I'd like to focus my report on updates from schools and opportunities to connect with students and families during their Neurodiversity Week celebration. Having just come from an amazing event, and I'm going to pause and add on where I did purchase many items created by neurodiverse students who have become artists and entrepreneurs, both a clock, a bracelet, and cards. And on the back of this card, very amazingly says, in a world where you can be anything. So events like this are the pillar of our community and really highlight the possibilities when conditions are created for success and acceptance. We deeply understand that staying connected to families with students with disabilities is crucial for fostering a supportive and collaborative environment and ensuring that the unique needs of a student are both met at home and in school. Effective communication and opportunities to share space strengthens relationships, promotes consistency in care, and enhances students' learning and well-being. I would like to share one of many stories about schools who work diligently to include diversity in their selection of guest speakers and amazing mentors. Aylesbury Public School is excited to share that author Michael Jacques, a public speaker and author, is presenting on April 2nd at 6:30 p.m. Michael was diagnosed at a young age with autism and an intellectual disability. Never one to shy away from obstacles, Michael has made his authorial debut, sharing experiences of his life to help audience understand the power of belonging. His story demonstrates the empowerment that comes from being comfortable in your own skin, knowing your strengths, valuing relationships, and giving back to your community. He looks for many opportunities to inspire and educate people on diversity and inclusion, and also shares the significant impacts that school and a supportive school environment had on his trajectory. Through his brave story, his personality, and positive outlook on life, Michael is an inspiration to many. He gives back by donating proceeds of his book sales to Special Olympics, and his visit to the whole school community will highlight inclusion, celebrate diversity, and build a sense of belonging for our entire school community. Next, as I want to share a few of the opportunities being shared for Neurodiversity Celebration Week. March's Global Neurodiversity Celebration Week was created by Sienna Castellone, provides the Peel District School Board with a continued opportunity to shine the light on our neurodivergent students and their families. Using participation data as well as feedback from last year, we've designed a plan which encourages the amplification of voices at the school level in each of our schools, while still providing the opportunity to build community and creative ways. On February, all schools were invited to register for an art contest under the call Shine the Light on Neurodiversities, and many of you saw the art displayed out here tonight. School collaboration, art pieces created on special canvases were provided, and completed an identity advocacy ASSVP with Erica Glover, who helped to co-create the contest, judging the rubric. These students, along with support from Aiden Lee, who was also out here tonight, will identify first, second, and third place winners. And we proudly share all art in our department. So all of the art in our department is only made from and by students with disabilities. All the other art has been removed, and we make space and as for all students. Well, we hope the student created art is hanging in schools, loudly sharing their voices. We are also showcasing them in a digital art gallery, and the prizes will be given out. This year, we're promoting use of our digital resources as well, knowing that many students have high levels of comfort. They're designed to provide educators and schools with various points of entry for learning and engagement, not just for this week, but for all school year, to build capacity across the schools. And our continued partnership with autistic artist Aiden Lee this week also provided the opportunities for schools to take part in a virtual art workshop online. And school-wide, some had school-wide assemblies, some had individual classrooms participate, and some with a small group of students. And these workshops will take place on March 20th from 9:30 to 10:30 or 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. No registration is required. Aiden just gave me a lesson on art, and I need them. And his ability to communicate and share his passion is inspiring. Combining this week with our monthly Autism Community Connection Family Night virtual event, welcome to join us in baking muffins and painting under the guidance of Peel educator Deanna Gown and neurodivergent artist Aiden Lee, and using the chat to build community to events. We also have our silent disco going on this evening, and many of these events are shared with schools, families, and communities through multiple means: social media posts, event posters sent to every school, memo crafted and shared with principals and vice principals, and information and links to share so that everybody was welcome. Finally, I wanted to share the update to the motion action log question around psychological assessments. The managers have been dedicated in collecting data to provide a fulsome response to SEAC. A total of 1,512 assessments were referred to the Assessment Consultation Committee during the 2022 and 2023 and 2023-2024 school years, and 1,472 were completed as of August 2024. The remaining 40 assessments were carried forward to September 2024 and have now been completed. Since September 2024, 561 psychoeducational assessments have been referred to the psychology department, bringing the total up to 601. 269 have been completed so far this year, and 304 are in progress. Only 28 have not been picked up yet. Separately, since November 2024, the equitable assessment practices within the student review process resource was shared, which we shared fulsomely with SEAC, which included the priority matrix. 62 students have been brought to the SRM for discussions related to a possible referral for psychoeducational assessment. Guided by the resource and priority matrix, other strategies and recommendations were discussed, and the priority for an assessment referral was determined to be low to high priority. Therefore, these students are being monitored and will be reviewed through the student review meetings. In collaboration with the members of the student review meetings, which is the administrator and school support teachers, department head educators, resource teachers, and PSSP staff, is a testament to the success and achievement of students. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Barb?
What does this priority matrix look like?
Through you, Chair, you will recall, I can't remember what
I
date.
wasn't at the meeting.
Oh, okay. So what a priority matrix is, a matrix that is a discussion point, and that's been shared as a tool that's designed to determine if an assessment should be given, or if there's other suggestions for further classroom practice, refinement of classroom practice, direct instruction of skills is needed prior to developing that. So it's a collaborative decision-making tool. I'm happy to give you, I think it was presented in the report, but happy to share a copy with you.
Okay, that's great.
Other questions or comments? And are those available?
Yes, my assistant forgot to send me the extra copy, so I will have her email them out tomorrow.
There's copies on the table.
Oh, there are. She'll get to it.
Oh, look at that.
My assistant did too. She didn't need to.
Very good.
That's what you
Talk about to the assistant. Okay, if there's no
Thanks,
further questions, then we need to do a motion that the special education advisory committee receives the superintendent's report. Trustee Albert, Trustee Clayton, man, you are the two that are moving and seconding. Is there any other discussion about the report? The questions? Okay, then all in favor?
Yeah.
And special thanks to Patrick's assistant for getting us those copies. So we're moving on then rapidly to the PDSB special education plan review / consultation. So we'd be looking at item 7.2.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I would like to ask Coordinating Principal Jeff Bertrand to present this report.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. This month we are looking at standards 10 and 11. So should be a fairly quick review this month. If you can go to the next slide, please, Mark. Just the link to our plan in case you need to find the sections that are in the agenda. And go to the next slide, please, Mark. Again, these are the same guiding questions we've shared every month just for consistency of practice. Just asking, is the information within the sections clear? Is the language accessible? Is there something that you feel is missing that is required under the standard? And most importantly, what additional information might be helpful for families, because that's what we need to know so that we can include it. Next slide, please. So standard 10 is the IEP standard, and we're not anticipating updates to this standard other than the IEP sample or samples that are included in this standard. We're going to need to do new screenshots and captures of those as we transition away from eLite to a new platform for next year. So we will be looking to just put a new screenshot in there of what the sample IEP looks like so parents can see it if they need to. And then we'll likely add the link to the guide of special education for families that we are currently revising and editing, so that link is also in the spec ed plan in multiple places. Next slide, please. Standard 11 is the provincial demonstration schools. So we don't anticipate any updates to this standard unless the ministry provides us with new information. The only update for this standard would be updating the number of students that are currently attending each of the provincial demonstration schools to make sure that is up to date and accurate. Next slide, please, Mark. Standard 12, this is staffing. So we're going to do some updates to our staffing as that is finalized. It's not finalized at this point, so we can't share that yet. Next slide, please. And we will come back with standard 12, actually. We'll bring it back to SEAC once it's finalized and share structures and numbers, much like we did last year, because that is part of the plan that we need to share, and we just aren't at that point quite yet. So again, options for submitting feedback. There's the QR code, the bit.ly link, and or Pat and I can take notes if there's anything pressing that you'd like to share with us tonight from these two particular standards.
Thanks, Jeff. Are there any questions?
First.
Okay, Barbara, sure.
Did you change the bit.ly link? Because I tried and it didn't work. I don't know if that's the same one I tried, but when I tried it didn't.
No, I can try right now.
Is that your only question, Barbara?
No, I have two more.
Through you, Chair, the link that I have in my slide deck it opens to the feedback
works?
page, so it should be okay.
Yeah, through you, Chair, open over here as well.
Okay. And then under what is an IEP, the sixth bullet down, where did that come from? Because it's not in the special education guide.
What is an IEP?
No page. Oh, page 14.
If you're looking at it on a desktop, it'll be.
I think it's record of the specific knowledge.
Understanding
skills.
10. So standard 10 individual education plans, overview followed by what is an IEP.
So Barbara, is it the one, a record of teaching strategy?
No, a record of specific knowledge and skills.
Oh,
What number is that?
so
It's the sixth.
Oh, I see.
sadly, it doesn't have, you have to count down.
Yeah.
Numbers would be handy.
Through you, Chair, I can take that back, Barb, and find out if that comes from special education in Ontario, growing success, or another document.
Okay, because you specifically referenced the special education guide from 2017 for those bullets. And also on page 15, let's see, the second paragraph, the last sentence says, if a family has specific concerns, they may be directed to the administrator. So I think a lot of families might not know who an administrator is. It's the principal. So can we change that language?
Through you, Chair, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
you can update that. Yeah, that would be our edu speak, so we can certainly change that.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Trustee Ellis?
Big Chair, through you. Just curious about the staffing numbers. So we said we don't have those now. Do we know when we will?
Through you, Chair, I can take that question. So we're just finalizing staffing projections now in accordance with our budget timelines and making sure that we're accountable to that. But certainly all staffing will be updated. I predict in alignment with the budget meetings that are happening with the trustees.
Okay, and through you, Chair, just my fault. The only reason I'm asking is historically at this committee, when we have a number, that number for whether it's more, whether it's less, whether it stays the same, whatever happens to that number, there are questions about impact from it. So I just worry that we'll get past this, move on to something else, and then once we have that number, we'll be back here and it'll be to the committee changes.
Yeah, and through you, Chair. So we, on a part of our ongoing commitment to providing all updates to the special education plan. So we're going through each standard with all of the changes. We're providing a summary in May of all of the changes being implemented across. So everything we shared monthly will be in that one document, but only the changes. Does that make sense? So we'll have including their staff members, right? So we'll have a document that of all the changes that we shared from standards 1 and 2, 3 and 4 examples, and then all of the recommendations that were made online or through SEAC. And if we've changed or not, similar to the document last year, but it won't be as long. It'll just be the changes. So that'll be coming in probably either April or May, because we want these to present the special education plan in May for approval.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? And if there's anybody online who does want to indicate, no other questions or comments? I guess there wasn't a significant amount of change. So if there is no further discussion, then we can move on from that and have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee receives the PDSB Special Education Plan Review consultation. Moved by our trustee Bettman and Barb's here. And if there's no discussion on that, all in favor? That is accepted. So we're moving on to 7.3, the vocational 1 program here.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I would like to ask Dr. Loris Naismith, Research Coordinator, to present the report on behalf of the board.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, it's my pleasure to be here this evening to present the Vocational 1 program review on behalf of our 17-member review committee.
So, Laura, is your mic on?
Oh, sorry. I pressed the button.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that.
I'll repeat.
Yes, please.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, and through you, Chair, it's my pleasure to be here this evening to present the Vocational 1 program review on behalf of our 17-member review committee, many of the members who are in the room this evening. Could go to the next slide, please. So for context, the Vocational 1 program is a full-time special education placement for students in secondary school in grade 9 up to age 21 that is available at 6 PDSB secondary schools, sites distributed across the region of Peel. Learners in Vocational 1 may demonstrate academic performance in the range of grades 1 to 3. The most common identified exceptionalities of students in Vocational 1 are mild intellectual disability and autism. Learning in Vocational 1 focuses on developing independent life skills related to the workplace and the acquisition of basic literacy and numeracy skills. Students in Vocational 1 take self-contained half-credit courses towards an Ontario Secondary School Certificate, or OSSC. An OSSC does not provide access to diploma granting or college trades programs. And the Vocational 1 program serves approximately 450 students per year. So that would be the students in grade 9 up until age 21. The review of the Vocational 1 program was initiated just over a year ago now in January 2024 in response to feedback from families, educators, members of this committee, and other community partners. The purpose of the review was to understand the extent to which the Vocational 1 program was meeting student needs and preparing them for life after high school. Our review committee, 17-member review committee, provided input and guidance for the review process. We gathered feedback about the program from multiple sources and considered this feedback holistically in order to develop 30 recommendations, which are oriented towards strengthening the Vocational 1 program and increasing post-secondary options for students. So as an overview of some of the different activities of the review, we conducted a literature review of academic and research literature. We looked at the program characteristics based on the data available in the PDSB student information system, conducted a jurisdictional scan of 8 neighboring or other large school boards in Ontario who had programs that served learners with a similar portrait. We collected feedback from students as well as parents and guardians to understand their experiences, both current and former. And we talked with educators through site visits, through an online questionnaire, and by interviewing central special education staff. So in total, we heard from 681 participants who are affiliated with the Vocational 1 program in some way, which includes 306 students, 290 parents and guardians, and 85 educators. And importantly, you want to stress here that no single data source would have been sufficient for this review, that each of these data sources and review activities has their own strengths and limitations, and that by considering multiple perspectives and looking at this data holistically, we're able to arrive at the recommendations that we did. Next slide, please. So tonight, the full text of the review is included in the SEAC package and will be posted publicly on our Peelschools website. But I wanted to provide for you today an overview of some of the key themes and the key findings of the review in order to be able to provide some context, and certainly happy to field your questions at the end of the presentation here. So moving into the first key finding, that by looking at data that we have from our student census and other data sources, we can see that social demographics reveal continued identity-based overrepresentation in the Vocational One program of specific groups, including Black and Indigenous students, students who identify as gender diverse and or 2S LGBTQ+, and students living in areas with high socioeconomic vulnerability, that these students are overrepresented, which means the percentage of these groups are higher in the Vocational One program than they are amongst all PDSB secondary students. Next slide. Most students in Vocational One graduate with a credential. By this, we mean they graduate with a certificate, the OSSC, as mentioned earlier. Historically, many Vocational One students have been able to transition to Vocational Two and to achieve Ontario Secondary School Diploma. And between these two groups, most of the students in Vocational One do graduate with a credential. However, we have very little information about their post-secondary destinations for groups, either groups who graduated with an OSSC or OSSD. So their post-secondary destinations are mostly unknown. That we found from our consultation with families that the communication around the program can be very inconsistent. Families don't always understand at the time of placement what the program is going to look like, what the academic structure of the program is, how the students will be earning credits, what post-secondary opportunities are going to be available to them. They may be told that their that their child will receive an OSSC, but they don't necessarily understand the implications that that has for their access to different post-secondary programs. We also heard from families that program communication around student progress was inconsistent in terms of being able to understand how their child was progressing from year to year and what skills they were developing and where they perhaps still needed additional support. So this is an area of focus for the review. Parents' guardian feedback also included concerns about program rigor and post-secondary outcomes. While they had very complimentary things to say about their child's school experience, they felt that they were had experience with caring staff who really, kind of created a good environment for students, that their child had an opportunity to develop friendships and relationships and participate in extracurricular activities and have as typical a high school experience as possible. They did express some concerns about how academically challenging the program was, that they did not feel that the program was sufficiently challenging for their child, and that particularly parents who were had students in the later years of high school, so grade 12 and even on to going into age 21, we're just realizing now that the limitations that their children would face in order to access different post-secondary programs. So a lot of concern around what would the next steps be for their child. Next slide, please. When we spoke with educators, very strong feedback that came back was around lack of program consistency that was attributable to a lack of clear learning expectations and curricular support materials available either from the province or from the board. And so as such, the educators were devising their own courses, in some cases, their own course material and resource documents, and didn't necessarily feel that they had the ability to be able to take risks in their teaching because of having this kind of lack of clear expectations or assessment criteria for the students in Vocational 1. We heard from administrators, from the principals at the Vocational 1 schools, that one of the key challenges that they faced was around staffing. So staffing of teachers in Vocational 1 programs, but also staffing of EAs in Vocational 1 programs due to some of the limitations around teachers requiring subject qualifications in order to be able to teach courses for credit. And that there was a lack of consideration for the social and emotional needs of students in terms of educational assistant allocation. And so they were really, working hard to be able to provide the opportunities that they could for students within the staffing limitations that they faced. Educators felt fairly well supported by their schools, by their administrators to teach in Vocational 1, but they did not feel very supported by the board centrally, prepared and supported to be able to teach in Vocational 1. They felt there was little consideration of the needs of Vocational 1 learners in the professional development offerings that were provided for them in the central initiatives that were put forward. So initiatives like the Empowering Modern Learners initiative, learning about consent culture, even the student census, that there was, just kind of not a lot of consideration for what Vocational 1 learners would need to be able to access these different initiatives within the board. Slide, please. So taking these findings into consideration and looking at where there were opportunities for change in the board, 30 recommendations were developed, which are organized around some key themes. And again, the full text of the recommendations is included in the report. So here tonight, we'll highlight some of the key themes of those recommendations. Firstly, centering students and families by supporting better communication with families around program placement and progress. Real need to be able to strengthen information that's provided at the time of placement, but also continuing on as the students progress through the Vocational 1 program. You can see here that this is connected to recommendations 1, 2, and 16. More academic challenge for students, more opportunities for them to have choice in the types of courses that they take, opportunities for personalization, and not just providing the same program to every student in Vocational 1. And that connects to recommendations for 13 and 15. Strengthen transition support, again, helping families to address this question of what is next for my child, and being able to provide support as they seek government assistance where necessary, post-secondary education, and learn about what other resources are available in their community. So really looking at strengthening that transition between life during high school and life after high school, which connects to recommendations 17 and 18. For educators, to strengthen the consistency of the program by providing clear learning expectations and curriculum support documents, as well as opportunities for professional development for educators and school teams to be able to take time to delve into these documents and to be able to have opportunities to translate them into things that will work in their school environments. And this connects to recommendations 5, 21, 23, and 24. More support for co-op experiential learning and employment skills training. This was seen as a key need from parents and families, again, being able to prepare their children to live independently, to be able to seek fulfilling employment, to be able to, kind of move on to the next stage of their lives and to be prepared to do so, which connects to recommendations 8, 9, and 26. More funding for program resources and supports. We heard from schools about their thoughts about how this program should be funded differently than other secondary school programs, considering the needs that students have for transportation to be able to access some of these experiential learning opportunities, for hands-on resources, learning materials, and for other types of program supports to be able to, again, have students achieve their full potential. Connected to recommendations 6, 7, and 10. Thank you. So next steps, so following receipt by SEAC, this review will then be submitted to the Board of Trustees for consideration. The Special Education Department will assume responsibility for the review, approval, and actioning of the recommendations. There are several factors that impact the ability to operationalize these recommendations, including staffing processes, collective agreements, and financial and operational feasibility. All decisions around implementation will consider the impact on student achievement and well-being alongside financial responsibility. So thank you for your attention tonight, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. That was really helpful. Any questions, comments? Trustee Elkins?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I know this was quite a long presentation, so to start, thank you very much to staff for presenting it. I think there was a lot of information here. My question is specific to identity-based representation. I was a little confused. Could we repeat, sorry, just the preamble? I thought staff said we had an overrepresentation. I don't want to misspeak my question. Is staff able to just repeat that first introduction about what we think is overrepresented or not represented?
Yes, so based on information that students provide through the student census, so when they answer questions about their identity, we're able to connect that information to their student records to understand which students are in the Vocational One program. And so based on the responses that they provided, that our data shows that students of specific identity groups are overrepresented in the Vocational One program. So that means, for example, the one example that I have here is Black students who identify as African Black or Afro-Caribbean, that they represent 18% of students in the Vocational One program. They represent 10% of all PDSB secondary students. So they are overrepresented. And so we saw similar patterns for students who identify as Indigenous, students who identify as gender diverse, students who identify as 2S LGBTQ+, and also students who live in areas of higher socioeconomic vulnerability.
Thank you. And sorry if I could follow up through you, Chair. So my question is, what would be, for lack of a better word, what would be adequately representative or reasonably representative? I'm just wondering how this data, I'm trying to understand what point this data is trying to inform, and how we can, is there something to remedy, or is there something to fix? I'm thinking about students that identify a certain way regarding gender. Maybe this is, is this, your staff are saying that this is an overrepresentation, but I'm just wondering if maybe this is just a fact. Maybe we just so happens to be that a certain amount of students have identified a certain way. I'm just trying to get a better understanding of what the data is supposed to inform.
Yes, so in terms of representation, if we were to see equal representation, so we have 10% of students who identify as Black in the Vocational 1 program, and 10% of all PDSB secondary students, we would consider that to be equal representation, so that they're not overrepresented and they're not underrepresented. So there are factors that we have been able to determine from the research literature, also from student experiences in our board and in other school boards in Ontario, that students who are racialized, so students who identify as Black and Indigenous, are subject to certain biases in their identification processes, where these students are directed to special education programs at a higher rate than students who identify as being of another racial category. And so it's not a simple answer in terms of there is one reason why, but there are a number of influences that contribute to certain groups of students being overrepresented in special education. And predominantly, most of those influences are negative influences.
Thank you. And so I guess my final question through you, Chair, would be, so if staff are making the case that there may be that students may be, for lack of a better word, being screened a certain way, how are staff planning to remedy that? Is there an investigation? Are staff looking to audit whether or not if this is accurate, if the overrepresentation is simply accurate, or if it's inaccurate? How are staff fixing this?
So through you, Chair, I'm happy to take that question. I think it's accurate, right? And we have that supported through the ministry review. And we know that there has been a history of streaming Black and Indigenous students into special education programs for a long time. So there is action to be taken, and action that our department and departments across the board have taken to remedy that in many situations. The presentation around the matrix for assessments, for example, is one of our ways to make sure that we're only assessing student based on actual need when classroom practices have been exhausted and we have high expectations of students. We have culturally responsive learning environments. Then we would consider if all of those things have proven to be true, an assessment and moving towards perhaps identification and placement. So that's one example. We've rewritten our call for student review meeting protocols to include the voices of families and allow families to have a strong voice in the pathway and planning of their children. And centering those voices in decision making has been a significant shift, whereas before traditionally meetings were happening in absence of families. So there's been significant changes being made, but we have continued work to do because we want to have, like Dr. Naismith said, zero disproportionalities for every group that's represented. It should be a program that is needed for students, and we should be clear in the data and the family voice that supports the placement into that program.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I don't have any more follow-ups. I suppose I'll look forward to a future report showing the success of the work we're doing and the growth in getting that number down. But thank you for the clarification.
Other questions, comments? Sorry, go ahead.
Mine's a very quick question. I just wanted to understand, under the Vocational 1 program, does that include the DDE and the DDR classes?
No, it does not.
Thank you.
Trustee Benjamin?
Thank you, and through your chair. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for this report, because I know we had 8 sittings or more. I mean, at least I participated in 8 of these meetings. And yes, there was so many questions and so much of discussion that took place, and finally we have it here in front of us. So thank you very much. So I just want to know, like you mentioned that we had about 681 participants, out of it 290 were parents. How are we going to inform them, or would you be sending a copy of the report to them so that they're aware of what is the outcome of their input to, the studies that you have conducted? That's number one. So
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Parents can be informed in a number of ways. So the report will be public after it goes to board and even after today's meeting, because it's part of the public record in the agenda. In terms of one of the recommendations is better communication from the board to parents. And so I think we're going to need to look at not only how do we communicate the report itself and the recommendations and the next steps, but how do we ensure that all of the communication about the program is more effective in terms of reaching parents and being easier to understand, more clear and transparent. So we're going to have to sit down and come up with a plan for how we manage that, because the 6 schools that have vocational one planning are all very different. And so we're going to want to make sure that the plan is responsive to those communities.
Thank you. Yeah, because there's always been that kind of a gap between communication and understanding the communication by the parents. So I'm glad we're thinking about that. And secondly, I noted that in one of your key findings, I think it was on page 2, was that we never kept track of what our students do post-secondary. And in your recommendations, you made it that you will be on page 5, I think, that we will be keeping track of what our students do post-secondary. Where is that? Yeah. So, which is very good, because for a long time there was always this question: do you keep track of what your students are going to do? Where do they reach after high school and so on? So I'm so glad that that part of it is being covered. And and I just want to share with you, because we met a student of ours who was in one of our vocational programs, and I met him in Square One. I said, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm looking for a job." And he's there on his own, which was good, because here you have this kid, and he went to college. So I said, "I'm glad that I'm going to talk to your mom and ask her if she needs any help." "Oh, no, I'll manage on my own. Thank you." So, which is good, so this is what we are aiming at. And I really thank you for all this.
Sorry.
Yeah, hi. My question was around identity-based overrepresentation. It's African, Black, Afro-Caribbean, gender diverse, 2SL, LGBTQ1, and then areas in high socioeconomic vulnerability. What about, what quantifies as identity-based? I guess I'm wondering, if I identify myself as having mental health struggles or hard of hearing, what about the other needs? If I identify myself as someone who is blind, low vision, or has, I guess I'm trying to understand why there isn't the other needs in the identity base, because to me, identity base could be I identify as so many other things other than these things.
Right. So through you, Chair. So our identity questions are guided by the Anti-Racism Directorate, and that is the legal authority by which we're allowed to ask these questions of students. And the anti-racism data standards allow us to ask questions around, or they require us to ask questions around Indigenous identity, race, religion, and ethnic origin. Mm-hmm. And we are also allowed to ask these other additional questions where we ask about gender, sexual orientation, and we do ask about disability as well. However, in order to be able to produce the statistics around what is underrepresented versus overrepresented in the board, we also have to know that number for the entire PDSB secondary school population as well. So, and when it comes to identity categories where there are small numbers, it makes it very difficult to have accurate representation in one population versus another population. So when we look at, for example, experiences of specific disabilities, we in many cases the numbers are not sufficient in order for us to be able to produce reliable calculations of whether something is underrepresented or overrepresented. So the data that we were able to share in the report is the data that we feel that we have sufficient representation both within the vocational program, vocational one program, and within the entire PDSB secondary school population, that we're able to produce numbers that can be, that can be reliable. It's difficult. It's very difficult when there are specific experiences, but because the vocational one program, so the cohort that we looked at was 452 students. So if in some cases there would be students who would be blind and low vision in that cohort, but in some years there would not be any students. And so it's very difficult to have an accurate picture of whether they are appropriately represented within that student group.
Thank you, trustee Cott.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just want to repeat what a lot of people have been saying about this report. It's very long, and it's nice to see that it's filled with a lot of information that we've all been looking forward to seeing. It's fantastic. The four of you were very, very good. Okay, so I guess my question is pretty simple. We had a list, there was a list of digital school boards that we went to ask to find information, how they handled these things. Have we gone, further afield, maybe to other provinces, maybe to other countries like Norway or Japan? Mississauga has a special relationship with the city, are we looking into, any of that type of research? Sorry to keep going on.
That's fine. Yes, thank you. And through you, Chair. So in the literature review section, we did consult in academic literature internationally. And there were some findings from the United States. There were findings from other Western countries where there's just more published literature available. So there some literature that I recall from Sweden that was included. However, we did prioritize looking at Ontario, where available, data that was available from Ontario school boards and in the Canadian context. The way that the Ministry of Education has devised their exceptionality identification categories is fairly unique. And so we wanted to be able to look at programs where the same types of exceptionality identifications were being served by that program in order to make reasonable comparisons and to see what we can learn from what other school boards were doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I was wondering if you're able to name any of the other school boards that.
Yeah, they're included in section 4 of the report, the jurisdictional span. That there are 8 school boards, they're named, and the links to the programs that they offer are provided where available.
Okay, and is there information also about their under identification of the same students?
Again, where it's available, there is some data published from TDSB that speaks to the same types of disproportionalities that exist in PDSB. There's also some data from the Ottawa Carleton District School Board that again speaks to the same kinds of patterns.
Great, okay, and great report, by the way. Thank you very much for all that information.
Other questions, trustee?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for the back and forth. I know I had already asked questions. Just have one more question, and I'm not sure if it was in the report. I didn't see it. But did the report consider geographic immigration patterns, specifically in any identified overrepresentation? Did we correlate any of that data?
So again, because the numbers of the overall program, looking at 450 students in the program compared to the entire PDSB population, we really didn't have sufficient size to look into ethnic origin, for example, which is another identity question that we ask. Although we do report on racial disproportionalities when they're available. And in terms of, kind of geographic patterns, and there is some data in the section on parent and guardian feedback that speaks to some of the particular challenges experienced by newcomer families. So that might be something of interest for you to look at as well.
Thank you, through Chair. I was thinking more of like Stats Canada data on where we see trends of people settling. We made some comment about socioeconomic socioeconomics and where people can live truthfully, and how that data would relate. I think that might help inform some of the information we're seeing before us when we look at this holistically, to see how well we've done in comparison to the directives. I just think that data might be important to inform us, but thank you so much.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, but that was excellent. That was really, really helpful. If we can, if there's no further questions or comments, then we would move on to accept the vocational one program review for implementation report is presented. So I guess we're looking for movers and seconders.
Yeah, sure.
There we go. Oh, so we go. Jasmine. Yeah. And any discussion? We've had quite a fulsome discussion. So all in favor? Thank you very much. And we are now moving on to 7.1.
There's one more recommendation.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, are we at 7.4?
There's first one.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't say. Sorry, I should have. There's two parts of the motion, and I only read the bottom one. I could pin that on my sheet. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to read the whole thing. May I have a motion that the report for the vocational one program review attached as received? We have received that. There's a second part of that, which is that the SEAC recommends that the Board of Trustees consider the 30 recommendations that the vocational one program review for implementation contains. So do we have to go do another go round? So
another one, yeah.
Mover and seconder, that's my bad. I can Barb. Any discussion? And all in favor? Sorry about that. I was saying, so that is adopted. I just assumed that they would go through the recommendation. That's what I get for making an assumption. So 7.4 is the EQAO and OSSLT accommodations report.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I would like to ask my colleague who's joining us online, Superintendent Laura Chavarro, to present this report.
Thank you so much and good evening, everybody. Through you, Chair, I am very excited to be presenting to you folks the information today about EQAO and OSSLT. This presentation is intended to highlight EQAO and OSSLT results of our PDSB students with formal and informal IEPs. And please note that the data that I'm sharing with you is data from last year, but this is the data that we currently use to identify next steps. I'll also share with you this evening the plan to support the work moving forward so that our results continue to improve in the next year. EQAO assessments are large-scale assessments. They offer valuable data on how students are performing in reading, writing, and mathematics at crucial points in their education. These data sets are intended to be used as means to identify trends and patterns in students' performances over time, and only are to be used as an overview. Students write assessments before the middle of June, so towards the end of the year, and the data is published and is made public in October. So the data, as I said earlier, that I am sharing with you was published in October 2024, and that is what we use to determine our next steps for this learning year. Slide 2. Mark, if you could move to slide 2, please. Thank you. School boards use EQAO and OSSLT data results to inform the student achievement plans. Schools also use the results of EQAO to support with SEAC or school improvement planning goals. We also use EQAO data to help inform resource allocation, support professional learning for our educators, and to bolster any resources that we need to offer the system. There's also ongoing training that is linked with EQAO as well as OSSLT. And for us here in the PDSB, we take a look at our EQA scores and they inform quite a few of the steps that we engage in as we start to work towards achieving the goals in the multi-year strategic plan. Can we get to move to slide 3, please? Thank you, Mark. I wanted to take a moment here to share with you just a quick, brief overview of EQAO. So EQAO is an agency of the Government of Ontario, that contributes to the quality and accountability of Ontario's publicly funded education system, and it's governed by the Education Quality and Accountability Office Act. EQAO, the assessment, assesses reading, writing, and mathematics in a digital environment. So each EQAO question that is presented to our students is connected to an age or grade appropriate curriculum expectation. And these questions are categorized based on the achievements chart. So there are questions related to thinking, there's questions related to knowledge and understanding, and there are questions related to application. And I'll give you more information about that shortly. So the EQAO assessment is the responsibility of all the educators in the system who are responsible for instructing students using the curriculum documents. Can we go to slide 4, please, Mark? Thank you. So EQAO's mandate is quite clear. It is to enhance the quality and accountability of the education system in Ontario. And this is achieved through student assessments that produce objective, reliable information for the public, and it is public facing, so it is released annually. Next slide, please. So just to go a little bit deeper into the type of questions that EQAO would ask. So EQAO assesses grade 3 students, grade 6 students in literacy and mathematics, and it assesses grade 9 students in only mathematics. And for our grade 10 students or those eligible, there is the OSSLT literacy assessment. Within the assessments for reading, for example, students are asked questions around explicit questions where they can find the answers to the question within the text. There could be implicit questions, or there could be questions that require the student to make connections within the reading that they're about to do. In the area of writing, there is a specific focus on having students develop a main idea, organize their thinking, or use conventions such as punctuation, commas, grammar, and spelling. In the math component, students are assessed based on the strands in the math curriculum. Things like number, algebra, data, geometry, financial literacy, those are all strands where students will be encountering questions from on the assessment. Next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. So EQAO, the 2 years ago, EQAO revisioned the assessment. It used to be a paper pencil multiple choice assessment. They have since moved it to the digital platform. So students engage in a digital assessment using their laptops in their schools, and there is considered a multi-stage computer adaptive assessment. What that means is that if a student answers a couple of questions incorrectly in a row, it redirects the students to a simplified question that they are able to access. That question is still within the curriculum expectations though. Okay, and those questions that are given to the students, they're no longer multiple choice questions. They are considered technologically enhanced questions. What that means is the student would read the question and they could put in order in sequence the responses, or choose 2 correct answers, or click and drop the question in the appropriate line or space that is provided. So it's a little bit different than what we used to know as multiple choice. They're considered technologically enhanced questions. Can we go to the next slide, please? So these are the accommodations that are available to all of our students, as well as to the students who have formal or informal IEPs. So within the EQAO assessment, because it is a digital tool, the students are offered a variety of accommodations. So students can have the text read to them. They can click on an icon within the assessment, and the actual passage or the questions and the potential responses are read to the child. Because EQAO is not assessing decoding, EQAO is assessing comprehension of the text. So that is a valid accommodation tool and will not interfere in the results. Students are actually also offered an opportunity to zoom into the text if they want to focus on specific components of this text, or zoom out. That is an accommodation tool that's available to all the students. There's also the opportunity to highlight or underline or circle using the digital accommodation tools that are available. Students can also use a digital calculator. That's one of the accommodation tools. And they can also split their screen so they can have side by side the text as well as the questions side by side so that they don't have to lose track of where the responses are, and they could maintain their focus by splitting their screens. These are all available tools for all students, whether they have an exceptionality or not, whether they have an IEP or not, and students are using them as the data is demonstrating. And then there are specific accommodations that are offered to students with exceptionalities who have specific requirements as identified in their IEP. So the chart that you have in front of you here can be accessed from the EQAO site, and this is available. It is a public accommodation chart where families as well as educators can access to ensure that the right accommodations are offered to the student during an assessment such as EQAO. Can we go to the next slide, please? So these are the exceptionalities that EQAO identifies for students who require additional accommodations. By no means is this an exhaustive list. I am aware of that. But if you make note at the very bottom, it does talk about our additional accommodations that are based on administrator and parent identification. So if a parent knows that their child is accessing EQAO and their exceptionality is not part of the list, they are able to advocate through the principal, and EQAO is informed through the platform, and of course the accommodation is offered. So there's a lot of supports available to students who require additional accommodations. There is also, if we go to the next slide, please, Mark. There are also additional accommodations for students who are low vision. There is a Braille format. We do have an opportunity for students to engage in the assessment using sign language. There is also verbatim scribing, as well as prompting as needed, with also additional support with extended time. So as long as we know what the student is requiring, if we also know if they have assistive technology needs through SEA digital tools, of course, there is an accommodation offered to the student, ensuring that they are able to demonstrate their best learning. If we can go to the next slide, please. So these are the data. Again, this is last year's data, and we continue to work on our EQAO scores here in the Peel District School Board. It is one of our areas of focus, and these are the results for our grade 3s. So last year in reading, our grade 3 students were slightly lower. They were performed at 69%. Our goal is to achieve 75%, which is our provincial standard. And right now we're hovering below that. And we have a plan in place as to how we are going to be increasing that, which I will be sharing shortly. For writing, we are at 62%, and in math, we are at 62%. Our goal continues to work on increasing those scores, and I will share with you momentarily what that plan is. If we could go to the next slide, please. These are our grade 3 students who have IEPs, both formal and informal. So what happens is when our administrators log into the EQAO site, they are able to identify the students with IEPs, which avails them to the accommodations that they need. So here's the data. So out of the 635 students with IEPs in grade 3, they performed, 55% of them performed at a level 2. 34.2% performed at a level 3, and 3% we're at a level 4. So we're very proud of our level 3s and our level 4s, and we are going to be continuing to work on those reading scores. In writing, we also had 635 students write with IEPs, and they scored at 56% at level 2, 30% at level 3. What is very interesting here is that 0.9 were at level 4. So again, we're seeing an increase and a bump up in our level 4 students, especially specifically those with IEPs, which gives us great opportunities to know that the work that we are doing is landing in a good way with our students. For math, 36% of our students are at level 2, 18.5 are at level 3, and 7.4 are at level 4. So based on these results, we know that we need to do a little bit of more work with our grade 3 students. It's really important to note, though, that our grade 3 students are not really used to working online in terms of their assessments, right? A lot of times our educators work with our students in having conversations, there's observations happening in the classroom, and there are student-specific products. So when students engage in this large-scale assessment online, it may not be the best tool to demonstrate their best thinking in this environment. So we are working on providing our students with more practice using a digital tool that we have created that mimics the EQAO assessment online. That way, it gives students an opportunity to use the accommodation tools, engage in a digital platform, work through some of the little hiccups that may happen during, stressful times, such as a large-scale assessment. And that way, when the time comes when they're actually engaging in assessment, they're performing to their best capacity. If we can go to the next slide, please. These are our grade 6 scores, okay? And our grade 6 scores for reading, and this is across PDSB, this is the general trend across PDSB for grade 6. 81% are reading at provincial standards, which is great. 82% at writing, and 49% in math. Again, our goal is the 75 plus. We've got that in reading and writing. We still need to move forward. We're pushing forward through that. Our math, we are working on diligently, and we've got a plan specific to math. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to look at our students with IEPs specifically. So in grade 6, 1,691 students wrote grade 6 EQAO with IEPs, and 32% of them were at level 2, 47% of them at level 3, and here's the amazing one, folks, 17% of them were at level 4. So very, very great, a good score here. We're going to maintain that momentum, but we know that the accommodations that our students are engaging in and being offered, they're actually demonstrating impact in this case. For writing, we're at 32% for students with IEPs, 38%, and 24% for level 4. So again, our level 4s are gaining momentum, and it's and level 4 means that they are 85 and over, folks. That's what the level 4 means. And so they're basically attaining almost close to perfect scores. And we're very, very happy with that. Math, we continue to work with our grade 6s on math. The students with IEPs in math, we are working with them. Again, our scores are at 30% for level 2, 26 for level 3, 20% for level 4s. So we did enhance our digital tool, the practice tool that our students are working on. We've built in more math activities for them within the EQAO platform so that they could get more practice, so that they could engage in the digital tool more efficiently, more effectively, use the manipulatives, use the calculator, and hopefully this year we are going to see improvements in our scores. The next slide is going to talk about our grade 9s. Now, grade 9s, they only write the math assessment, okay? And this year, last year, our score was at 53%. Again, math is an area we are working very hard at improving. The scores that we got this year from our grade 9 math, because of all the work that we've done, is demonstrating a significant upward trend. That data is still embargoed, but I can say that we are improving. Next slide, please, Mark. So slide 15 demonstrates where we're at as a board in relative to other school boards. Again, we are working on those scores. We know why our scores are a little bit lower than what we would like them, but we are, like I said earlier, seeing an upward trend. Next slide, please, Mark. Here are the grade 9 students who performed on EQAO, and they do have IEPs. 22% are at level 3. And the most amazing piece of data here is that 15.5% were at level 4. We are at 8% higher than the province. So these are great results, folks, when we are looking at our level 4s. This is what the momentum that we want to build, and we want to maintain that. So the last data set that I want to share with you is our OSSLT. And OSSLT is an assessment that happens around in grade 10. Any student who is eligible to write, they could be in grade 11 as well, they are able to write. And this is an assessment, a literacy assessment, and is required for graduation, folks. So OSSLT, we are seeing great momentum here as well. And we've got 1,300 students. If we go to the next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. These are the number of students with IEPs who wrote OSSLT last year. And we are showing 63% were successful. And again, we're going to be continuing with the work with OSSLT. And this year, we put together a plan for our students, and we are seeing improvement. We'll wait to see what the final results are. And again, those results will come to us in October. And of course, we will be sharing them. They are made public right away. And then we will offer an interpretation of what those are when we receive them. So if we go to the next slide, please, Mark. So looking at these overall scores and seeing the trends and patterns, it's very important for us to understand why the scores are the way they are. And just to sort of set the context for folks, in September 2023, we received the new literacy curriculum. So a lot of our teachers needed to become more acquainted with the new curriculum, respond to it with new teaching strategies, ensure that it is culturally responsive and anti-oppressive and anti-ableist. So that took a little bit of time. And then at the same time, we were working with a new digital platform for EQAO. So all of these pieces compounded together resulted in the dip in some of our scores. And we are now seeing, as students become more proficient and as educators become more confident with the curriculum, our EQAO scores are responding with an upward trend. Most importantly, we're working very closely with our educators as well as our administrators on all of our professional learning, building capacity across the district. So again, all these pieces will come together to create momentum to boost the scores that you saw today. Next slide, please. So this is our digital tool. This is what our students are practicing. And it looks, folks, it looks almost identical to the EQAO platform that our students engage in during the assessment. So what we have done is we've abbreviated the assessment into small chunks that teachers engage in anywhere between a 3-week cycle to 6-week cycle. So teachers would provide the students with this digital tool and the kids will practice. Well, after they practice, the teacher will receive a report. The report will tell the teacher which students performed well on which questions and what strategies they would need to support the students with, so that when they engage in the next assessment, their scores would increase. We are noticing a significant increase in that. All the assessments contain the same accommodation tools. So if we go to the next slide, please, Mark. So the digital tool that we have assesses both language and math, similar to EQAO, and the student simply clicks math and they enter the world of math, or they click language and they enter the world of language. It's very independent, and the students are given the feedback afterwards. Next slide, please, Mark. This is what one of the passages would look like. And if you take a look on the right-hand side, well, my right-hand side, you will see the accommodation tools that are available to students. These are available to all the students, okay? So you can see the little question mark that asks for help. And then there is the speaker icon where the child will click and the text will be read to them. Obviously, they would be wearing a headset, and then the zoom in, zoom out, and then the highlighter or the calculator tool are available depending on the grade. Okay, so this is just an example of the accommodations that we have. Next slide, please. This is an example of a type of question that we have. So remember when I had said it isn't a multiple choice anymore, students will actually have to click and drag some of the questions or organize the responses in order. This is an example of one of the types of questions that our students would be able to engage in. Now, as you can only imagine, our students need to practice this. If they haven't seen a question such as this and they don't know what to do with the answers, then they may not be able to perform it to high caliber. So practice is a good way of getting them used to how to respond to the assessment so that when the time comes, they're well equipped. Next slide, please. This is one of our math questions. And again, it's not a multiple choice. Students would need to highlight a skill that needs to be taught, and our educators in our classrooms are doing that at this point in time because of this practice tool that we've created. Let's go to the next slide, please, Mark. We wanted to see if those digital accommodation tools are actually being used by our students. This is a snapshot, and basically you can see which of the digital tools are being used the most. And in this case, the color is coming out a little bit funny on the slide, but based on the data that we're seeing, students are accessing the speech tool more so than any of the other tools. So they are really liking having the text read to them multiple times so that they could better understand how to answer the question effectively. So we're monitoring the accommodation tools on an ongoing basis. We're working with our educators to ensure that they are using those tools, not just with EQAO, but in other platforms as well. And we're maintaining the supports in order to ensure that our students receive the service that they need in order to perform to high caliber. Last slide, please, Mark. So we continue to work closely with our educators using this digital tool. This digital tool supports the entire year, so educators will engage in it. There's multiple practice sessions that they could do with their students. It's not a one size and it stops. There's multiple opportunities. We've got a lot of professional learning for educators. We've got a lot of resources that we've created. The work that we're doing is cross-department. We work with SpecEd very closely with Superintendent Squicato's teams, as well as the SEA leads as well, in order to ensure that our assistive technology and our IEPs align with EQAO, so all of our students who are engaging in the assessment are doing so efficiently and effectively. Most importantly with all of this is that we lean on our students. We want to make sure that we are supporting them as best as we can so that they could demonstrate their best thinking. And we do survey them all the time, and the survey results have been very clear. They would like more of this practice. They would like to engage more in these types of questions because they are understanding and they are seeing the momentum themselves. So with that, folks, this is just a quick overview of EQAO and OSSLT here in PDSB, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Questions and comments?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, thank you for the report. The report has a lot of interesting information in it. I saw one of the graphs for grade 9 math across the province, and it made me think, do we have an aggregate data set for how we compare holistically to the other 70 some odd boards across the province?
An aggregate? Sorry, I
Yes.
didn't understand the question.
So we have it broken down by the grades in which EQAO was tested. Do we have something that would say, as a function of our overall EQAO score, this is how we compare? Or at least do we have something, because it's not in this report, would we have, all of our grade 9 math scores compared to all 70 something boards, grade 6? Do we have that data? Is it organized that way?
We don't have access to their student by student data. We have access to ours. But what we can see are the trends and patterns over time. So we can't compare all of our grade 9s item by item to their grade 9s. We get the general trend and pattern.
Overall sources.
Yeah, so that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if we can see it overall by board. So can we get that? Because I don't see all other 70 something. I'm just curious to know how we compare, because look at a grade 9 math.
Through you, Chair, Superintendent Chabarro, he's not talking about individual student scores, but he's talking about board scores similar to what you showed tonight.
Oh, yes. Yes, we can, if we go on the EQAO website, they will give us all the EQAO for across the boards.
Thank you, through you, Chair.
It's
So I've
public.
been on the website, but it's not intuitive. So it won't have, PDSB, grade 9, and then a graph, how we compare. But we have a portion of that here today. Is our staff able to give us that? The reason I'm asking, just for clarity, is because I'm looking at the scores here. We're the second largest sport in the country, second best funded in comparison to the TDSB, who is just marginally doing slightly better than us, but we're being outperformed by much smaller boards. I'm sort of curious to know why that might be. But just at base level, for starters, I'm wondering if we can just have that data sent to us.
Through you, Chair, and thank you for that question. Yes, we can provide that data. It does take a little bit of mining to get the bar graphs where we want them to do. We often lean on our research department to do that for us because they know their ways of navigating the toolbars, but we can definitely share that information.
Thank you. And I would just say, as long as it's not too onerous, I don't want to ask for something that is going to be, hours and hours and hours to get, but if it's something that we can pull together and share with the committee, I just think it'd be nice to have.
Yeah. Through you, Chair, I can add that to the motion action log, and then when.
But only if it's not an onerous, I want to be clear about that.
When Superintendent Chamar, Dr. Naismith happens to be here, we can see what we can do to facilitate that. I'll put it on the motion action log. Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
I was just gonna add that I see it for grade 9, but I don't see it for grade 3 and grade 6. And so further to that, it can be added for grade 3 and grade 6. Because the comparison is just for Peel against Ontario, but not Peel against the other. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Art?
I was wondering if we can get these, this information broken down by exceptionality just for this board.
Through you, Chair, yeah, sorry, through you, Chair, the EQA website provides it by students with IEPs, but they didn't delineate it by exceptionality. So that's not available to us.
But we've gotten it in the past. We've gotten it broken down by exceptionality in the past. And we've also gotten it with gifted separated out.
So through you, Chair, we'll take that back because Superintendent Chabar and I were on the website together and didn't see it delineated in that way. So we can make a request through EQAO to see if we can do that.
So EQAO no longer takes gifted out of special education?
So we'll take that back. So when we were looking at the data to create the presentation today on the EQAO website, this is how it was presented and this is what we shared. So we'll take it back.
Okay, and also this printing is really tiny and I can hardly read it. Can we or all of us get the graphs that you have so that we can print them out bigger?
These just the slides come out.
Yeah, the slides are so tiny.
I can zoom.
I zoomed it on my computer and it's just fuzzy.
Oh, it's distorted.
It doesn't come. It's
not
distorted.
It's not distorting for me.
Well, it's distorting for me.
I wonder if it's just
Especially on the first page.
It's clear, yeah.
Yeah.
Some in the
Right.
others.
More pixels. So I think it might just be a technique because if you go to the graph, sorry, I'm past them.
Yeah, you're right. The latter ones are fine.
Okay, so we see the graphs.
But yeah, I did notice the first one.
Yes, some of them are okay, but look at this,
Yeah.
the first one.
And it might
this
have just been the tech stuff, because on mine, I'm unable to zoom in.
When I zoomed in on this, I couldn't read it.
Seems to be working. I'm not sure if it was a tech thing, but it seems to be working.
Okay, I'll try it again. I can't read it, you'll hear.
Yeah. No.
So, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Go ahead.
But just curious, like, I love that there's speech to text and they can speak and then their answers are recorded for blind, low vision children and kiddos. But if speech to text is leveraged at like 55% or whatever phenomenal rate, how do we then like ensure that we're not like giving tools that, you know, with kids that can read the material, because there's a reading component, a writing component, and then a math component. And so are we not skewing the results if we're not letting them read and it's like speech to text and then someone's reading it to them? Like, I'm just wondering how we then, like, are the results fair? Are we accurately testing the reading component?
Thank you for that question. And through you, Chair, EQAO is assessing comprehension. So it's understanding of the text, not the decoding of the text. They really want to get to the essence of the thinking, the student's application, and the student's knowledge. They don't want the decoding to be a barrier, whether it can be read or it can be decoded, because those are not the things that the EQAO assessment is actually assessing. So by providing a speech component, it's not negating the actual expectation that is being assessed. So for example, if I were to read to you a math question, it's not going to take away from your math skill. It's actually going to support you in engaging. It's going to provide you the time that you need to actually engage in the actual math skill itself. Because I'm not assessing whether you can decode the question that is written. It's more around the concept and the skill that I want you to do. So what we're doing is we are extracting a component that we're not really assessing by providing that accommodation. Similar to when you use your glasses. You put on your glasses to enhance your vision. It's not going to take away from what it is that you're going to be seeing once you see it. That's how we're looking at it.
Thank you.
Sorry, just correction for the record. I did check the graph that Barb mentioned. So she's just referencing, there are some images that I think are embedded into the graph, which when blown out are blurred. So just correction for the record.
So through you, Chair, Barbara, are you asking for a printed out copy of her slide deck? Because I can certainly accommodate that.
Yeah, or she can just email it to me and I can print it out myself, just bigger than this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. So Laura, I can share Barb's email. Does anybody else like a copy emailed, or is everybody else okay? Okay, thank you.
Apologies for that, folks, and thank you for sharing.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, if we have none, then we would be moving forward with a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee receives the EQAO and OSS LT accommodations report as presented. Moved by Trustee Alves, seconded by Trustee Cochran. Any discussion? And so all in favor? Thank you very much. Thanks, excellent. We are now moving on to item 8, which is communications for action or receive. Do we have anything there? Okay, so if there is none there, then we would move on to reports from representatives on councils associations. Please, if there's anything from the community groups that they'd like to share. Does anybody want to share anything on behalf of their organizations? All right, if we're fine there, then we would be moving on to questions asked of and by committee members, which apparently there are none. So we're just flying through here. Oh, sorry.
Regarding the attachment that we received about a month ago, 4 attachments. One of them was the Family's Guide to Special Education.
Yeah.
So, if we have issues with that, who should we direct them to? Okay,
So through you, Chair, if you can give me your comments, then I can take them back to the authors and we can discuss if changes could be implemented.
okay,
Or we could, if you prefer to do it in person, we can have another meeting scheduled where we can talk about that. Thank you for providing feedback. We do want to get that to publish for next year for our families, because it was
next
requested,
year,
yeah,
okay.
from SEAC or earlier, because we are going through the annual review process. It would be helpful, right, like sooner the better, but we're working, but the content needs to be solid before we move to our graphics and public appreciation part.
Okay.
So happy to set a meeting with you, or you can provide it to me and I'll take it back.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, so that would be number 11. Then wait, 10, 11. So then we're moving on to committee number 12, committee member motions for consideration. So Barb, is that, no, we're at 13. Okay, so if there's nothing for number 12, then we are moving on to 13, notices of motions and petitions. That's 13.1, which is the notice of motion, re special education program changes 25-26. And I believe that's Barb and on behalf of Barb and Jennifer.
Have a comment for it?
Barb, do you wish to introduce your motion, notice of motion?
Yeah.
Okay. So does Barb?
So through you, Chair, Barb did ask, read it twice, so she, I think, is asking that it goes just through the agenda. Is that correct? Barb?
Yes.
Yes, question.
Sure.
Through you, Chair, I was just wondering, when we do get that at the next SEAC meeting, can we have it also sent to us in writing?
It's in the agenda.
Yes, it's attached to the agenda.
The
Yeah,
attachment.
you just keep
Okay.
scrolling.
Thank you.
If you go to 13,
Done and done.
13.1, it's there.
It's right there.
Don't have it.
Oh.
I have the motion action log.
Yeah, it's in front of the motion action log.
I have it on page
You're right. I do have that.
146.
Yep. 13.1.
Yes,
Thank you. Thanks, Barb.
you're welcome.
Now, do we need to read that?
No.
Okay. So this is it. We're just accepting that as a notice?
Yeah.
Yes, through you,
Okay.
Chair, we can just note to anyone listening at home that the notice of motion is included in the agenda.
Okay. So that is in the agenda and it is on 145 to 146.
Yeah.
Okay, Barb, so that, and that's satisfactory for you, Patricia?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then we would now be moving on to 14, which is the motion action log.
Through you, Chair, we have 2 pending items on the motion action log. Trustee Lucas Alves asked that the research department share how PDSB has determined what questions should be included in the census data and why. Trustee Alves would like to have the census survey questions shared at the trustees meeting before being released to families. The response from the research department was that they noted the request and will provide an update when the information is available. So they have noted the request. The other pending item for the motion action log was that how many students are currently awaiting psychoeducational assessments and support. And that response was given today in writing through my oral report.
Yes, go ahead.
Information regarding the ONSUS should still be on, because we were supposed to get a further breakdown of the ONSUS data.
Through you, Chair, we thought we had answered those questions with a further breakdown, but we can look back at our notes. Was there something pending that you felt like we missed?
Yeah, we wanted it broken down by grade.
Through you, Chair, we can add that back on then. Thank you.
But ONSUS data broken down.
And that's all? Any other comments or additions?
I think that's it.
Great. Well, then that would move us to adjournment. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There was one, a takeaway from me, and it was around the regional choice programs. I believe that was gonna be taken away for further consideration. And I don't see it on the motion action law bill.
Through you, Chair, the response was given at the last meeting and it was shared in writing. I know you had a further follow-up.
Yeah.
And that further follow-up was shared with Superintendent Chavarro orally, but we can provide a further response.
Do you have a response? Is she in line? I think she left. Right?
Yeah, she had to leave, yeah.
Okay. I guess my only comment is, you know, sometimes we tend to not challenge because things have been done because that's just how it's been done the year before and the year before that. But I guess I'm just challenging you to maybe come with an open perspective on, because kids with special needs have also been disproportionate or face disproportions. And so I would really urge you to consider looking into that. I'm not disputing that the other, you know, nationalities or, you know, have not faced any discrimination, but I do think that we need to consider the kids with the needs in those programs.
Okay, thank you.
Does that cover everything then, folks? So then we are now moving on to adjournment. So may I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee adjourns the meeting at, it's like 8:44 p.m. Trustee Bud and Trustee Bench, I'll mix it up a bit then. All right, thank you all for attending.